Holding the chisel and mallet. Each mason will have their own preference as to which tools to use. Here we see that our mason, Ross Lovett, has chosen to use a traditional style mallet along with a 1/2-inch chisel. Note that Ross is using the appropriate combination of a mel and mallet-headed chisel. Take the chisel in the non-dominant hand. This is typically the non-writing hand. Using a reasonably relaxed, yet not overly loose grip, hold the chisel approximately midway. Place the thumb on the top side of the chisel shank. At first this may seem an unnatural way to grip a chisel, but it provides both stability and control along with an element of protection against hitting the thumb with the mallet. Once comfortable with holding the chisel, attention may be turned to the mallet. Holding the mallet in your other hand, become accustomed to its weight and feel. It's best to have a comfortable grip, one that is secure but not too rigid. Using a spare piece of stone, take a few minutes to practice striking the chisel and cutting the stone. Focus your attention on developing confidence with using the tools. Remember PPE for yourself and others. The chisel should, in most circumstances, be held at approximately a 45-degree angle to the face of the stone. This general principle for holding the chisel may be applied to most situations. At this stage, it is also helpful to become acquainted with the pitching tool. The mason's mallet is now exchanged for the weightier pitching hammer. The pitching tool is positioned against the side of the stone with the head of the chisel tilted slightly downward. When swinging the pitching hammer, it is tempting to look at the hammer end of the chisel in order to make a connection between the two. The hardness of stone and its resistance to cutting can vary considerably. Some stone is more difficult to pitch than others, and it may be necessary to strike the stone several times. Unfortunately, when first learning this technique, a few grazed knuckles are almost inevitable, and the beginner is advised to wear sturdy gloves for added protection. Producing drafts and flat surfaces. After gaining confidence with using the tools during the practice sessions, we can now progress to the first simple exercise. Measurements in the exercises are given in both millimeters and inches. The figures in inches have been rounded for simplicity and therefore will differ slightly from the metric dimensions. This will not cause problems so long as a consistent system of measurement is maintained throughout the exercises. The following tools are required for this exercise. A squared block of stone approximately 300 by 220 by 120 millimeters, or 12 by 8.5 by 4 3/4 inches. A 12 millimeter or 1/2-inch chisel. A claw chisel. A mallet or hammer appropriate for the chisels. The scribe. A ruler. Straight edge. Trammel. Sharp pencils, and a soft paintbrush for removing dust. Here, a margin of consistent depth, known as a draft, shall be cut to one edge of the stone, this being a very common task when initially cutting stone. At a depth of 20 millimeters, or 3/4 of an inch from the top surface of the stone, mark a continuous straight line with the scribing tool around the perimeter edges of the block. For the moment, we are working on one side of the stone only. The line, however, should be continued around the 4 sides of the stone. The remaining lines will be needed as we progress. Once scribed onto the stone, darken the scribed incision with a sharp pencil. This technique provides a more permanent line than by marking with pencil alone. Using the 1/2-inch or 12 millimeter chisel, start at one corner and cut the stone away in reasonably thin layers. Take care not to remove large sections of stone. Do not attempt to cut all the way to the line. Roughly flatten enough of an area so that the wider chisels may subsequently be used for the next stage. It may be necessary at this time to use a wide claw chisel in order to bring the corner close to a surface finish. Finally, by carefully following the scribed lines in both directions with the blade of the bolster chisel, a small flat area will be produced at the corner. Follow both lines carefully, as this will help keep the chisel level. This process should now be repeated on the 3 remaining corners. The area between the 4 flattened corners may now be brought down nearer to the required line. First, a pitching tool is used. With practice, a mason may be able to accurately cut very close to the required line, but for now it is sufficient just to remove a significant amount of the stone. This is commonly known as the waste. The space between the 4 corners may now be brought closer to a finished surface level using a claw chisel. Working from one end, Ross now uses the inch chisel to carefully cut down to the line. Notice how the chisel is pulled back slightly from the surface of the stone after each strike of the mallet. This allows the mason to more easily see the work as it progresses and helps the mason achieve a consistent depth of cut. Should the mason not lift the chisel after each strike, there is a tendency for the chisel cut to drift downwards below the desired line. It is not necessary to cut down to the line in one pass of the chisel, and confidence will grow with experience. To avoid accidentally cutting too deeply, it is safer at first to angle the cutting edge of the chisel slightly upwards. Concentrate on cutting a neat line and leave the inner part of the draft slightly high. Once the front edge of the cut is to the line, the mason can check the accuracy of the work with a straight edge. The 2 corners are correct and can therefore be used as a reference. It is important that no more stone be removed from these 2 areas. The straight edge should be held at its center in one hand. Gently place the straight edge along the draft and inspect the work carefully. By doing this, the mason is able to identify high points in the work as well as the areas where no more stone is to be removed. These high points may then be carefully worked flat to obtain a level surface, consistent with the 2 corners. This process is usually repeated numerous times before a flat draft is achieved. To avoid fatigue, the mason keeps the elbow close to the body. The grip on the handle should not be overly tight. Allow the weight of the mallet to do the work. Do not be overly concerned with speed or force at this time. Focus on developing a consistent rhythm and familiarity with the task. After working on all 4 edges of the stone, we are now left with a raised area in the middle section, which is surrounded by neatly worked drafts. The next task is to reduce the amount of unwanted or waste stone on the upper face. As this is a piece of very hard sandstone, it is more likely that plucking may occur. This could result in the removal of stone below the desired level. To avoid this, the claw chisel is used to create a safety margin between the flat and rough surfaces. Once the draft has been completed, the remaining 2 corners must also be cut or worked down to the required level. Repeat the process. Again, start with the corners followed by leveling the draft. After this, repeat the cutting of the draft on the remaining 2 sides. It is during these early and sometimes repetitive stages of learning the craft of stonemasonry that some students may find their enthusiasm tested. It is important to note that the time spent on these initial activities provides very important tool skills. In addition to learning some common disciplines that are relevant to everyday tasks, skills are also acquired for the more complex masonry projects. Stonemasonry, by its very nature, is a highly disciplined craft, and there are no shortcuts to mastering it. Stonemasonry students at college may well be required to produce several flat surfaces before their skills are considered sufficient for them to progress onto the next phase of their training. The furrows left by the punch tool are removed with the claw chisel. An experienced mason can achieve near to perfect drafts which are worked to within a few millimeters, or about a 1/16 of an inch, of the desired surface finish level. The level of these cuts are frequently checked with the straight edge. Note that while checking with the straight edge, Ross holds the mallet under one arm. This is simply a more efficient way of working than putting the mallet down each time the stone is inspected. Where a more shallow draft has been made to the perimeter of the stone, it may be possible to skip the rough draft process using the punch and moving directly on to levelling with a claw chisel. However, it is important that no steps of the process are rushed. Attempting to remove too much stone with the wrong type of chisel will result in the plucking of the stone. This may take the stone beneath the desired finished surface level. Starting at the front of the stone and working from right to left, or, if left-handed, left to right, carefully flatten the surface with a bowster. Check frequently for accuracy with the straight edge. Do not move on to the new draft until the current one has been completed. Rubbing the straight edge on the stone will leave marks on any high points. These may then be removed with the bowster. Due to the hardness of this particular sandstone, the final pass is performed with a bowster and metal hammer. Note that the side of the hammer is used to lessen the impact while still providing the sharp cut required to finish such hard stone. All marks are close together and consistent in their orientation in order to obtain a homogeneous finish. With practice, the tool marks left by the bowster will become neat and consistent and are often considered an attractive style of surface finish. Occasionally some other type of tooling or effect may be required. These will be discussed in the next exercise.